Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming and joining us for the seminar programme that we have ready for you today. I'm delighted to welcome you to LCT CleanEx. My name is Gillian Farrer. I work with the Textile Services Association, which is the trade association for the laundry and dry cleaning industry. And we're running this seminar programme on behalf of MEG Events and LCT CleanEx. So we're delighted to welcome you. Thank you. The first speaker we have today is Jackie Chappell. She's the former CEO of Railways and has become a cleaning extraordinaire. And she's here to give us an insight today about what it's like to be a woman in a man's world. So please put your hands together to welcome Jackie.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm delighted to see so many of you coming here to listen to me, and I hope I don't disappoint. Whilst my story starts as a woman working in a man's world, I wouldn't want you to think that I was a feminist, far from it. As Marilyn Monroe once said, any woman that would like to be equal to a man lacks ambition. Just kidding. She did say that, but I'm just kidding. Okay, so I haven't got lots of slides. You'll see that I talk with my hands, and if I had to worry about that as well, we'd be totally lost. Before I started on the railways, I did have some experience working in the corporate world, and I always had a dream, right from teenage years, of having my own business. And I was working for Porsche Cars at the time, really, really good job. And being a single mum with 2 children and a mortgage to pay, it was always quite difficult to make ends meet. And I started a market stall. I'm not ashamed of it. It was quite an interesting thing to do. But a friend who shared my dream of running our own business in haberdashery, knitting and stuff like that said, why don't we open a shop? I ought to have had a little bit more experience of starting my own business, really. A business plan would have been a very good idea. Mine was a wish list, which didn't really deliver. But anyway, so we'd had a very, very profitable, or I'd had a profitable market stall, but the business wasn't quite able to support me, being a single mum with 2 kids and a mortgage, as I said. So I was perusing the papers one day and I saw this part-time job on the railways. They were asking for assistant ticket examiners. What I didn't know was they'd never had this job before. What I also didn't know was they had never employed women in an operational role before. But apart from all of that, I turned up for the interview, which was perfect. 5:30 in the morning till 9:30 in the morning meant I could be at the shop by 10 to open the shop and still do my share of the business. We shared childcare. I worked mornings, childcare afternoon, and my friend did the opposite. So there I am. I've turned up for my first day on the railways. And because they'd never had women in operational roles, they had no idea of uniform for women. So you could probably picture how I looked. It was a man's jacket, man's trousers, a man's shirt. The one, just salute to being a woman, was this hat that looked like a St. Trinian's. So I didn't have this man's cap. I had this hat that looked like I'd just come out of St. Trinian's. So I've turned up at 5:30 for my first morning, and the guarders opened the door and he's looked me up and down. I'm not surprised really, but he looked me up and down. He said, you can go and sit in first class and don't get under my feet the whole shift. Find yourself a paper and stay away from me. Oh, okay. So I did as I was told, because the guard is in charge of the whole train. So I've sat in first class. This went on till about Thursday, and I could see him getting more and more tired, running up and down the train, doing the safety, the dispatch, the tickets, you know, dripping, and I'm sat there reading the paper, trying not to be noticed. Thursday, he said, right, you can start the other end and I'll meet you in the middle when we've checked all the tickets. Whew, I've arrived. I've actually been accepted. So I think it was that attitude that did me really well on the railway. I just kept quiet when it was difficult, just did my job, didn't make any fuss. Hi. No, it's okay. So I was very lucky that I had an area manager who was able to see potential, and he was a really good leader, and I tried always to follow that example throughout my working career. There were quite a few opportunities made open to me. I think the next thing I did was run a station. No woman had ever done that before. It was only Henley-on-Thames, which of course has about 3 people an hour, unless it's regatta week when there's thousands of people per hour. But I loved that little job, and what I hadn't realised was that he had recognised the potential in me and was manoeuvring me into the right kind of roles that would mean that I would get a job suitable for my talents. My stock in trade, if you like, was training and development. And within 18 months, I was running all the training programmes on the Western region, which was really exciting. People used to say to me at the time that I'd had quite a meteoric rise in the industry. Well, if you call 17 years from the very bottom to the very top meteoric, you know, it didn't feel like it at the time. Part of it was my fault because I was in charge of these training programmes. Every September I would have young people coming on at 16. You aren't actually allowed to work in operational roles on railway till 18. So I was responsible for their career development, their personal development for the whole 2 years. And I could never move on to promotion because I was always halfway through a batch, if that makes sense. They used to call me, you know, here comes Mother Hen with her little brood, all these youngsters. But I really loved that job, and I probably did it for far too long. Then privatisation came, and I was headhunted to go to an engineering company. Unusual for a woman, not necessarily in an admin role. But I took it because this was another big promotion for me. And it was quite nice, actually, to be a big fish in a small pond. And there were no women on the board at all in those days. But I was the one job that was just below the board, in charge of all the training and development. The company actually struggled in the privatised industry. It was a whole new ballgame, really, you know, a completely different, more commercial attitude than had been present before. And I've never found out who. One day I will, but I have never found out who. But they had this board meeting, and I used to quite often be invited into the board meeting, but this day I wasn't. I thought, that's fine, they're obviously not discussing anything that needs my input or involves me. But I was told afterwards that there was quite a severe discussion about the financial fortunes of the company and about how some managers and supervisors hadn't adapted very well to the new regime. So one of them said, we need a man with a proper commercial brain, somebody who's got experience of business. And then somebody piped up and said, or a woman with balls. It took me quite a while to work out whether that was a compliment or not, I can assure you. And that probably was the worst job. I loved the job, but it was probably the worst time on the railway because it really didn't sit very well with the male supervisors and engineers. And it was quite uncomfortable, I have to say. They renamed my office Room 101. It wasn't very nice to come into, but hey, just get on and do the job. That's what they paid me for. So then, shortly after that, the fortunes of that company did suffer quite badly. And I was actually made redundant, which, when you join the railway, it's like joining a family. And so it felt like being excommunicated by my family. And I was quite upset, I would say. So I stayed home for a few months licking my wounds while my phone was ringing off the hook with offers. Oh, Jackie, I can't believe they've made you redundant. You know, because being a woman in a man's world, you're quite high profile. People know who you are. So I said, oh, it's okay. I'm not going to do anything till after Christmas. I'm just going to have a bit of time off and I'll think about what I'll do after Christmas. And then I had a phone call from the then chief executive of the Rail Industry Training Council, which was it was the industry lead body responsible for all standards of training and qualifications on the industry. So the chief exec said to me, Jackie, he said, I'm moving on. I think he was going to a Welsh rugby club as their business development manager. He said, there's only 2 people in this industry who could do this job. And Paul said no. Oh, thanks very much, but at least I was second choice. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. He said, it's only 3 months. He says, just a 3-month secondment, he said, while the company goes through a transitional phase. Well, I didn't know what he meant by that, but that was fine. I was up for the challenge. Yes, I'll take it, I said. So my first day on the job, the other guy who'd said no thank you, Paul, rang me up. He said, Jackie, what were you thinking of? He said, that's just ruined your career. He said, you won't be going anywhere after this. You have just accepted the poison chalice. Okay. He said, and by the way, he said, we're cancelling our membership until you prove that the company's worth every penny that we put in. Right, okay. On closer inspection, all the members, which under British Rail had to belong to the industry lead body and pay a membership fee, were leaving in droves. It was £120,000 a year turnover, 1.5 staff, plus me, who had yet to learn what on earth she was supposed to do. I said to the PA, I said, my predecessor told me to read myself into the job. He said, I said, there's more paper here than I can read in 3 months. She said, I wouldn't bother. She said, I just wouldn't bother. It'd be a waste of time. The government are changing all the industry lead bodies, of which there are about 170. She said they just want a few strategic national training organisations. And what they've decided for the railway is that we'll belong to the bus national training organisation because we're all about passenger services. Okay, anybody who doesn't know very much about the rail industry, there's this little tiny bit at the top that's all about passenger services. And then underneath is this iceberg, which is all about the engineering, the safety, you know, maintaining the track, all the real estate they had, and at that time, hotels and parcel force and things like that. I said, I don't see how passenger services, a bus national training organisation, will help all of our engineers, such a big part of the industry. So I went to the person who'd been put in charge of me as my boss, if you like, while I was CEO for 3 months, and said, this doesn't work for our industry. And he said, the trouble is, he said, you can't win. You have to have 95% of the industry behind you to be a national training organisation. I said, well, that's okay. Give me 6 months and I'll do it. No, he said, I'll give you 3. So, after 3 months, we succeeded. We were the national training organisation for the industry, and I was appointed as its chief executive permanently. I did that job for 7 years and I absolutely loved it. But it had its moments still, being a woman in the boardroom. I can remember my very first, they used to hold, trying to keep the industry on a par and talking to each other, they used to hold cross-industry chief executives board meetings, and they were held on the top floor of Railtrack House. I've turned up for my first one, really nervous, but nice black Planet suit, lovely Radley briefcase. I thought I look the part, you know, proper chief executive material. So I've walked in and I was a little bit early. There was the chief executive of Railtrack and 2 girls putting out pens and papers and getting the coffee ready. So he said, he said, you must be the minute taker. He said, could you give the girls a hand with the coffee? I said, well, actually, I'm Jackie Chappell, I'm chief executive of a national training organisation. I said, and I take it black, please. Needless to say, I never turned up for another one of those meetings in a black suit again. You just disappear, you know, in this sea of, you know, men in black and grey and navy. And there was once, I was a keynote speaker at one of the industry organisations' conferences, and I've turned up in a pink suit. This chief exec of an engineering company knew me. He came and said, oh, Jackie, he said, you look really pink. I said, yeah, you didn't have any trouble finding me, did you? 2,000 people there, and he knew where I was straight away. Unfortunately, after about 6 years or so, the fortunes of the industry changed quite dramatically. I used to catch a certain train to work every single day, exactly the same train, into Paddington, into Platform 1, and my office was on Platform 1. And then something really dreadful happened. Does anybody remember the Paddington crash? Ladbroke Grove, really awful. really awful. I was extremely lucky. Somebody must have been looking after me that day. I was on holiday in Greece at the time and lost friends and colleagues, you know, and my best friend Pam had the most awful injuries. She was the lady in the mask. She was featured on TV, stuff like that. And if you ever want to read a story about somebody overcoming, you know, such disaster, then you need to read Pam's book, The Lady in the Mask. Anyway, my daughter had a little girl, so these two things had happened. I've just become a grandma, and that puts a new focus on life totally. And this awful thing had happened on the railway, so I thought, I've been tapped on the shoulder, time for change of direction. So I did. I resigned as chief exec and left the railway completely. I don't think I'd realised quite how burnt out and stressed I'd been by all the safety reviews and everything after the accident, you know, so I was quite closely involved in helping with the press conferences and the inquiries and everything like that. So I spent 6 months contemplating my navel, and I thought, well, I can't spend the rest of my life like this. What am I going to do? And all the time that I'd been really, really busy, I'd always outsourced my cleaning and my ironing. Because when I'm asked for a hot business tip, I always say, outsource what you're not expert at. Only do what only you can do. And in my view, the only person that could be mum to my children was me. So even when I was skint, I used to have my cleaning and ironing done, because the time that I had off was so precious for me and my children. So it was never, I'm quite OCD. Now you wouldn't know that about me, but I am quite OCD, and it was never quite how I wanted it to be. So I sat there and thought, what am I going to do? And I had a light bulb moment. I thought, I'm going to open my own ironing business. Nobody ever told me what a hard way it is to make a living. My daughter and I started it, just the two of us and a friend of hers, and we slowly built it up. And our customers started to say to us, if I could find a cleaner as reliable as you are with my laundry and my ironing and everything, that my life would be so simple. No, sorry, I really, really don't want a cleaning company. That's not on my plans at all. So guess what? Within 6 months, we had opened a cleaning company. I remember 2 or 3 years in, and they say to you, you know, 3 to 4 years before you turn a profit or really build the business up. And I thought to myself, this is hard work, and we don't feel as if we're getting anywhere. I said to my accountant, I said, shall I just throw the keys in and just give up? And he said, well, Jackie, unless you think you can turn this business around, give up. And I said, but that's what I do. I know how to turn businesses around. I can do this, I said. A year later, I'm sat there, and he said, well, looking at the books, he said, this is a completely different story. Phew, at last. But then, of course, we all remember, don't we, that our really, really bad recession. Great, that's just what I needed. But here we are now. The ironing lady and the cleaning ladies are 12 years old. I thank the cleaning ladies, actually, because I expect you all felt it. Dry cleaning, laundry, ironing did go down during the recession. And even though people might have ironed less clothes, they still want their cleaner every week. I think that was the kind of last vestige, if you like. So we might not have existed if we hadn't had the cleaning arm to our company. But we have. We're 12 years old, we're 25 staff, a fleet of 6 vans. We're expanding now. We're going into a partnership with Laundrap to work with them to increase what we offer. And we've also we always outsourced our dry cleaning, and we've just started a partnership as well with Electrolux with their wet cleaning. We aren't qualified to do dry cleaning, but we've learned how to do wet cleaning. So 12 years on, and here to stay. And I have to say, as hard as it was, I am so proud of that company. It's my baby, if you like, the ironing lady and cleaning ladies. I do try to network, because I think that's really important for business. And you know, I still get the same little thing, and I'm sure they don't mean to do it, but for example, I was recently at a networking meeting in London, and this chap said, what do you do? I said, oh, I'm Jackie Chappell, I'm from the Ironer Lady. He said, oh, he said, daytime TV, pressing people's shirts. I said, I haven't picked up an iron in about 20 or 30 years. He just looked at me a bit odd. But that was the thing that started to put me off networking, you know, being a woman in business. And, you know, no, I don't iron shirts at all. I've got a team that do that, and they do it very well. I wouldn't even pretend to be as good as them. So I was at a Keep Fit class a few months ago at my old school, because one thing I've always said to people that are going into business for themselves is you've got to believe, aspire and achieve. I don't know where that came from, but I was doing this Keep Fit class, and it's my old grammar school that I used to go to. And there's this big shield on the front of the hall on the stage. And the school motto is exactly that: aspire, believe and achieve. And oh, well. So I thought about it that evening. I thought, do you know, I've not done so badly for a girl whose religious knowledge teacher shouted down the hall when I was leaving school, "You'll amount to nothing, Jacqueline Goodson." I think I might just have proved him wrong. And I want to say thank you very, very much for listening to me. And if anybody would like to ask some questions, I'm happy to answer them. If there's not much chance here, I'm happy to stay behind and answer questions afterwards. And thank you very, very much for listening to me.